about first what EPA is, second what EPA consists of, and third I'm gonna be talking about some tips. I'm gonna be sharing some tips with you guys to help you pass and help you know the answer without having to read the whole question. So I will be sharing those tips. These tips that I will be sharing is tips that have worked, and I have shared it with lots of my students, and they tell me that it does work. So, and that's the same tips, of course, that I use to pass my EPA. So we're gonna wait for some people to get in here. While we do that, I'm gonna be talking about what your EPA is. So EPA is it's not a certification, it's a license that you gotta get to become an AC technician. So that license basically gives you ability to purchase and handle refrigerants, and your EPA is it stands for Environmental Protection Agency. So that is your EPA. So in a few minutes, I will be sharing tips that I have more tips, but this is the ones that I thought of, and I wrote them down just to share with you guys. So these tips are really helpful because you can actually, you don't have to read the whole question. You just read this single word of the question and you will know the answer. And it works every time, and it's kind of common sense once you think about it. So yeah, we're gonna let some people get in here. And your EPA consists of 4 major parts, well, 4 sections. So yeah, it consists of 4 sections. The sections are each 25 questions, 25 sections, 25 questions per section. So you got your core, you got your type 1, you got your type 2, and you got your type 3. Your core will be the most important one. You have to pass your core to be able to get anything else. Even if you pass everything else, but you don't pass your core, then you won't get anything. But if you pass everything, that is called a universal. You're a universal technician for your EPA. So yeah, every section consists of 25 questions, and what's really helpful, just focus on this. Once you're doing the section, keep in mind what section you're doing. So if you're doing the core, it's gonna have questions for the core. It's gonna be like the basics. If you're doing your type 1, it's gonna be your type 1 appliances, the small appliances, high pressure. Type 2 is gonna have questions related to type 2, which is medium pressure. Type 3 is low pressure. Basically gonna ask you about chillers, a ruptured disc, and all that. And these tips that I'm about to share with you guys, it will make it so much easier. Just by reading this one word, you will know the answer. So, first of all, leak rates. It's mainly gonna be on type 1. It's mainly gonna ask you about that, but it doesn't really matter. Any types that ask you about leak rates. So your leak rates, you got 3. You got commercial, industrial, and comfort cooling. speak
Hey,
Spanish.
what's up, Louis?
What's up, Ronald? How you doing?
Good, good. Just tired.
I bet. Hold up, I'll get back with you in a second, and I'll tell you what to do. I'm doing something right now.
Alright, bro. Ya, yo estoy llegando a la casa como 5 o 10 minutos porque I didn't want to join so late.
Yeah, don't worry. I got you. I got you down on the paper you called me.
Thank you, bro. Appreciate it.
Okay. So, like I was saying, you got three leak rates: comfort cooling, industrial, and commercial. So your commercial, when it asks you about leak rates, your commercial is always going to be 20% leak rate. Your industrial is always going to be 30% leak rate, and your comfort cooling is always going to be 10% leak rate. So, now your when it talks about cleaning refrigerant, the process of cleaning refrigerant, that is always going to be recycling. When it is removing refrigerant, that is always going to be recovering. And when it says a chemical analysis, it usually says it at the end. When it says the process and then at the end it says chemical analysis, that is always going to be reclaiming. You see chemical analysis is always going to be reclaiming. Now, the things that you need to know, because it does ask in the EPA major parts a lot, and it's gonna be basically on like capital letters, like major part or major repair or anything like that. But the major parts that you gotta know, well, not that you gotta know, the major parts of a system is your evaporator, compressor, condenser, and metering device. The two that change pressure is your compressor and your metering device, and your evaporator absorbs heat, your condenser rejects heat. That's why when you put your hand over your condenser outside, is pushing out hot air. So your condenser rejects heat, and your evaporator absorbs heat. The other one, there is one or two questions that is an indicator of a leak. An indicator of a leak is always going to be excessive superheat. So yeah, whenever you see indicator of a leak, it's always like the first thing is excessive superheat. If you get excessive superheat, you know there is a leak on the system. The next one, again, one or two questions in the test. Yo, Ronald.
You can hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you now. I'm doing a live on YouTube, just sharing like EPA tips and questions. If you want, like, I'll leave my mic on so you can hear.
Okay, bet. Yep.
So
Cuando yo llegue. Yep.
again, one or two questions on the test is gonna have a drop-in substitute. It's gonna ask you about a drop-in substitute of a refrigerant, or it's just gonna have drop-in. You just read that word. We don't talk about it because there's no such thing as a drop-in substitute. Another thing that we don't talk about is over evacuation, and that is over evacuation does not occur. That's why we don't talk about it. Now, mainly on type 3, it asks you about a rupture disk. When it asks you about a rupture disk, it's always going to be 15 psi. And when it's 15 psi, it's always going to be rupture disk. That's going to be the answer. Now, mainly for type 1, small appliances is always going to be 5 pounds or less, charged at the factory and hermetically sealed. Ronald, I'm gonna go over the leak rates and all that, just so you'll hear it. I already did it, but just so you'll hear it, I'll talk about it again. So for leak rates, there is 3. There's like the question's gonna begin talking about like what is the leak rate, and then it's gonna say this one of these 3 words: comfort cooling, industrial, or commercial. For commercial cooling, commercial cooling. For commercial, it's always gonna be 20% leak rate. For industrial, it's always gonna be 30% leak rate, and for comfort cooling, it's always gonna be 10% leak rate. Now, when it mentions either cleaning refrigerant, removing refrigerant, or chemical analysis, it's going to mention one of those words with a process of this word. When it is cleaning refrigerant, it's always recycling. When it's removing refrigerant, it's always going to be recovering. And when it has chemical analysis at the end, it's always going to be reclaiming. There's a lot of questions that ask you about major parts or a major repair, and these are the 4 major parts, and you gotta know them just to get the right answer fast without having to read the whole question. So the 4 major components are evaporator, compressor, condenser, and metering device. Your metering device and your compressors, they change pressure and temperature. Your evaporator absorbs heat, and your condenser rejects heat. That's why when you go outside, you put your hand over the condenser, you feel hot air, because your condenser is pushing the hot air out. Rona, did I talk about like the indicator of a leak?
I think so.
Alright, so just indicator of a leak is always going to be
No, I'm in school.
excessive superheat. But yeah, I think I went over all of them already. So yeah, I have more tips. Can't really think of them right now. That's the ones that I thought of it, and I just put it down on a paper to share with you guys. Alright, so for the people that weren't here, like I said, EPA basically stands for Environmental Protection Agency. That is the license that you have to get to become, not to become, but to license that you have to be able to purchase and handle refrigerant. That is what the EPA gives you access to, purchase and handle refrigerants. If you don't have your EPA, it is illegal to purchase or handle refrigerant. Your EPA is 4 sections, 25 questions per section. So you can get you can get less than 7 wrong per section. Of course, you don't ever want to do that, but yeah, to pass you can get less than 7 wrong to be able to still pass. So it consists of the core, type 1, type 2, and type 3. Your core is the most important one. If you don't pass the core, then you don't get anything else, even if you pass everything else. So your core is the most important. I have videos on my channel going over the core. I just put one up today, and I have other ones up too. But yeah, your core is the most important one. Your type 1 is basically gonna be small appliances, your high pressure equipment. Your type 2 is gonna be your medium pressures. So it's gonna, every time you're taking the test, just like know what section you're doing. If you're doing type 1, it's gonna ask you about small appliances and stuff like that, high pressure. Medium pressure for type 2, and then type 3 is basically gonna ask you about low pressure, basically chillers and all that stuff. And your core is just gonna be your basics, but is the basics that's more important. That's the ones that you need to know to you need your core to be able to get everything else. You pass everything. That is a universal technician. So you're gonna be a universal technician. So yeah, I already went over the tips today. If there's anyone in here that wants me to go over the tips again, if you weren't in here, let me know. Let me drink some water. Whoever just joined, were you here for the tips that I shared for the EPA? If you want me to go over it again, I will. Right, I'm ending the live in a few minutes, like minute 20. I'm actually gonna end it now, minute 19. Alright, so I don't know if tomorrow I'm gonna do this again, sharing more tips, but I am planning on doing something bigger, just to share more information about the EPA with you guys and make it fun, like play like Kahoot or something, just as a review, so you guys can get the basics of your EPA down and like be able to pass your EPA. I also, there's an app called EPA 608 Practice, and I bought an HDMI to C port, and that's so I can put it on the TV and just share questions that are more related to the test. share them with you guys, so you guys can actually like follow along. That's what I'm trying to do. I gotta plan everything and know, get stuff together so I can actually do it. But yeah, I'm gonna end this right now, and I might be back tomorrow sharing more tips. Peace.